The last ordinary thing I remember about Danielle is the way she corrected me without meaning to. We were standing in line somewhere. I don't remember where anymore, just that it was loud and the floor was sticky and I was tired. I said something careless, the kind of thing people say when they assume the shape of the world is the same for everyone. Danielle didn't argue. She didn't make a point of it. She just tilted her head and said gently, "That's not really how it works." I laughed because it didn't feel like a correction. It felt like a clarification, like when you mispronounce a word you've only ever read. I thanked her. We moved on. It didn't linger. That was the last ordinary thing. I don't mean it was the last time I saw her or the last time we spoke. I mean it was the last moment that didn't feel weighted in retrospect. The last moment that didn't glow faintly with consequence when I think about it now. At the time, it felt small. Most things do. I hadn't thought about Danielle in years when I saw her name again. It appeared the way names do now, unexpected, slightly flattened, surrounded by other information. Not in my messages, not on a screen meant for remembering, just there, folded into something else. For a second, I thought there must be another Danielle with the same last name. It's not uncommon. But I knew before I checked. I knew in the way you know something you've been avoiding confirming. I closed the page, I made coffee, I stood at the sink longer than necessary, waiting for the kettle even though it had already clicked off. I told myself I was overreacting. Danielle and I met our first year of school. Not the first day, but close enough that the difference didn't matter. We were both new in the same way, too alert, too eager to prove we belonged. We ended up sitting next to each other in a required seminar, one of those classes designed to introduce you to the idea of thinking critically without asking you to do too much of it yet. I don't remember what the class was about. I remember her pen. It was bright, the kind of color that felt intentional. I remember thinking that she seemed comfortable already, like she had decided to be there instead of just arrived. We started talking because we had to, a small group assignment, an exchange of names, the unspoken relief of finding someone who seemed to understand the rules of the place without needing them explained out loud. Our friendship didn't feel dramatic in the beginning. It felt practical. We studied together, we ate together, we learned which places on campus were worth the walk and which ones weren't. When we moved off campus, we didn't move in together, but we stayed close enough that it felt like we had. People like to talk about friendships as if they form around shared passions or complementary personalities. Ours formed around proximity and trust. We were reliable to each other. We showed up. We remembered details. We knew how the other took her coffee. Danielle was better at noticing things than I was. She noticed tone. She noticed pauses. She noticed when people smiled without meaning it. I noticed outcomes, grades, deadlines, whether something had been resolved. I thought this meant we balanced each other out. There were moments, early on, when she would say something about a professor or an administrator or the way a conversation had gone, and I would feel a small tightening in my chest. Not because I thought she was wrong, exactly, more because I wasn't sure what she wanted me to do with the information. Sometimes I asked, sometimes I didn't. I told myself I didn't want to overinterpret. I told myself I didn't want to make something bigger than it was. I told myself that part of being a good friend was not rushing to judgment, not encouraging conflict where there might be none. Danielle didn't accuse me of anything. She never framed her experiences as tests I was failing. If anything, she was careful not to ask too much of me. She explained things when I didn't understand. She laughed things off when it seemed easier. She didn't insist on agreement. That was part of what made the silence possible. The first time she formally complained about anything, she didn't tell me right away. I found out because she mentioned an email she had sent, casually, the way people mention chores. I remember feeling surprised, not by the complaint itself, but by the fact that she hadn't come to me first. When I asked, she shrugged. "I know how this stuff works," she said. "I just wanted it on record." On record. I liked that phrase. It sounded orderly, responsible. The response came weeks later, polite, careful, full of language that suggested concern without committing to action. Danielle showed it to me on her phone while we waited for food. I read it twice. I told her it seemed reasonable. I said it was probably just a matter of time. She nodded. She didn't argue. She folded her phone back into her bag. Looking back, I think that was the moment she stopped expecting anything from me. I didn't notice right away. Our lives were busy. Things shifted gradually. She took on more hours at work. I spent more time in the library. When she seemed tired, I told myself it was temporary. When she seemed frustrated, I told myself it wasn't my place to intervene. I believed, honestly, that institutions corrected themselves eventually, that fairness was slow but real, that speaking with complete certainty was irresponsible. I didn't think of my silence as a choice. I thought of it as restraint. The day I almost said something came later, after enough had accumulated that the atmosphere felt charged. There was a meeting, not dramatic, not hostile, just serious. I was there because I had been asked to be, not as a witness officially, just as someone who could provide context. I remember sitting in that room, listening carefully, feeling the weight of the words that weren't being used. I remember thinking that this was one of those moments people talked about in hindsight, a moment that clarified who you were. I remember deciding to be careful. I didn't lie, I just didn't expand. I didn't volunteer. I stayed close to what I could prove. Afterwards, Danielle didn't confront me. She thanked me for coming. She said I knew it was awkward. She said she understood. That was almost worse. When the decision came down, it was framed as unfortunate but necessary, procedural, regrettable. Everyone expressed concern, everyone moved on. Danielle's life became more complicated after that. Not all at once, just enough that each new problem made the next one harder to manage. Housing issues, financial strain, missed deadlines that wouldn't have mattered before. I noticed, I always noticed, I just didn't interrupt. When she stopped answering my messages, I told myself it was temporary. When other people stopped asking about her, I told myself they assumed she was fine. When explanations settled into place, I let them settle. They fit easily. Now, years later, her name appears and I feel the shape of all the things I thought I was doing right, all the ways I mistook caution for care. I don't tell this story because I think I can fix it. I tell it because I know now that silence doesn't stay neutral forever. It only waits.